Back on my grizzly again. Back on my grizzly again. Back on my grizzly again. Back on my grizzly again.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Dishhhtribute with me, your host, Damon Geis. We are back after no episode last week, but I can assure you we have a packed show today going over all that we missed, plus tons of fresh content. In the NBA, I give my thoughts on fallouts from both conference finals as well as my finals predictions. In the NFL, I'll give my opinion on the best landing spots for three-time All Pro Gerlald McCoy, along with my outlook on the Jets front office moves. And lastly, in wrestling, I'll discuss the fallout from Money in the Bank and why WWE may no longer be the wrestling company. Starting off in the National Basketball Association, the Warriors were able to sweep the Portland Trail Blazers, of course, in 4 games. For Golden State, I felt like they were playing with no pressure at all. Even the game where in Game 4 it came down to the end and Dame couldn't get that, buzzer-beating shot to go. I just felt like Golden State played with no pressure. No Boogie, no KD, and, when you look at Golden State, people say, well, KD really, ruined the league. I wouldn't necessarily say that. And that's because if you look at the way those series played out, the only team that the Warriors needed KD for was LeBron and the Cavaliers. There's no question about it. Now, I think last year they didn't need him, but they had him, so it is what it was. I mean, that's why there was a sweep. But as far as against Kyrie, Golden State was never going to beat them again. After the first year where Kyrie was hurt and K-Love was hurt and LeBron had to go out by himself, it was already tight enough for Golden State. Then, after the suspension the following year for Draymond Green and Bogut getting hurt, and the Cavs were able to come back from 3-1 against arguably, questionably, the best team ever, Golden State brought in the big guns, and we saw what KD has done for them, 2 finals MVPs back-to-back years. So for Golden State, we know how great they are. They've done nothing short of been a dynasty, created a dynasty, and here we are with them playing in their 5th or 6th straight final, and who's surprised? We all knew what they brought to the table. For the Portland Trail Blazers, they're a very good team. No one, not myself rather, saw them getting this far. I thought Houston would be there, but of course the way the seeding played out, in Denver coming up short against Portland, OKC coming up short against Portland in the first round. Portland was able to get to the conference finals, and like I said, it was no pressure for Golden State. I just feel like, Dame is one of the top point guards in our league. You know how great CJ McCollum was in the playoffs and has been in the past. But for Golden State, they have the best backcourt in the league. And when you look at how Portland gets their buckets with their backcourt versus how Golden State does it, for Golden State, it's more ball movement. It's more everybody touching the ball that series. If someone's hot, though, you go to them. For Portland, that, being hot logic does apply, but it's about who gets there first, and that person takes over for the entire game. 9 times out of 10, if Dame is rolling, then CJ isn't, getting too involved, and vice versa. And that's the problem. They don't really have a third option which they can look to. I know Rodney Hood was their guy for that against OKC somewhat, and mostly against Denver, as well as Seth Curry. But when you look at them and the most elite teams in today's game getting over that next level, it's been from that forward position. So for them, I believe they need to go out and have those top 2 guys, Dame and CJ, this season, talk about, bringing in a guy who can be that third option for them. Maybe a Tobias Harris. If they're able to pry Middleton away from the Bucks, we'll see about that. But for Portland, that's their biggest concern. I'd say go getting a number 3 option. We'll switch over to the Eastern Conference Finals as the Raptors were able to win 4 straight against the Milwaukee Bucks and close out the series. Man, Kawhi Leonard, I said it, 2 weeks ago. It's definitely time to start go ahead and putting him in that best player in the world conversation. I know that, he's been up there before the injury. He was no doubt top 3. But Kawhi, we see it, playmaking, both sides of the ball. We know how great he is defensively, and You can see the train with Kobe is coming full alive. Kawhi is being that bucket getter on the offensive end, the one the Spurs wouldn't allow him to be, and you can just see now he's playing his game. He'll size you up. He can shoot the three. He can step back and shoot the three. He can drive past you, kick it out to one of his guys on the wing. And then, like I said, you know what he's doing defensively. And it's not really close as far as other guys being that top player in the world. From what Kawhi does from a defensive standpoint, he is in his own category. And it's scary. It's really scary. So for me, you know, what he was able to do against Giannis in this series, I'm not too surprised. I expected this from him. Once you play LeBron in his prime in the finals and were able to give him a run for his money, then, you know, there's not too much that you're concerned about going forward. And he did that at a young point in his career. Now Kawhi, only being 27, being the star of his own team, you know, he's built for this. And he showed it not only against Philly, but he also showed it against Milwaukee. And that is the biggest reason that Toronto is going to the NBA Finals for the first time in franchise history. Next, you have Fred VanVleet and Norman Powell stepping off the bench and giving them great contributions. For me, just watching how they moved, it was very interesting to see how they were able to put themselves in position to get buckets. You know, something Kenny the Jet Smith said on TNT was, before you could see VanVleet and Norman Powell and other guys on the bench like Ibaka just not getting good looks. They would just, you know, take those looks that were given to them at that point and fire it off. And those shots weren't landing. When you look at what they did against Milwaukee, it was they played off Kawhi and they were able to move without the ball. And that was their biggest, you know, the biggest thing for them getting open shots. They were able to move out the ball and move off Kawhi being so hot that they were able to get those good shots off. Also, I want to go ahead and say congratulations to Fred VanVleet on having his son. A lot of people have joked around and said, hey, you know, when you bring that kid into the world, you feel like a new man, and that's what he played like. But in all seriousness, that guy was on something else. He in particular brought it. But shout out to the whole Raptors bench. You know, they brought it, and that's the next big reason they're going to the finals. From Milwaukee, you know, Giannis, he's a great player. You know, going to be one of the best in our league for years to come. Probably going to be receiving the NBA MVP. But, you know, as far as getting over that hump, we know what he has to develop in his game. Giannis has a long way to go before he's mentioned among the elite with the LeBrons and the KDs of the world. And the biggest reason for that is he has a lot to grow on offensively. You know, he has to even add a mid-range jumper to his shot. A three-point shot, of course. Now, you could see at times, you know, he would size you up, dribble you up, and you think that he's going to dribble past you, so you give him more respect from the three-point line, and that's how he was able to fire off some shots. But in clutch time, we need to see Giannis be able to take over and put the ball in the basket from any spot on the floor. He also needs to work on his free throws, 5 for 10 in the last game. You know, that's unacceptable from your star. You need to be able to rely on him at the free throw line if you're not going to be able to rely on him shooting the ball anywhere else. He definitely has to bring it from there. I believe Giannis can also work on his jab moves, you know, getting the ball in his hands and pump faking and having the defender worried once he gets his hand on the ball. He can also work on floaters, his back to the basket instincts, his post moves as far as, you know, getting inside. You know, he's very strong. We all heard the stories about how he's added on muscle, but for Giannis, he has to be able to work with that. Use it to your advantage. The guys like you saw Shaq and Charles Barkley do, the dream, be smooth with it. Use your footwork to get you in possibilities, to get you in situations rather where you can put the ball in the basket at a consistent rate. I also believe he could, you know, work on a hook shot. You're big enough to the point where, You're bigger than everybody else. Put the ball in the basket. However you need to do it, each guy has their thing. KD, you look at him and he's just bigger than everybody. So that's his strategic outlook on the offensive side of the ball. Kyrie has the ball on the string, can put the ball up from anywhere, off dribble anywhere. Curry shooting from three, Harden get into the free throw line. If that has to be your method of success, then ride with it. And I believe Giannis, being that he will be the best player in the league one of the best players in the league for years to come, he has to find his thing. But all I can say is Kawhi may have doomed the East for years to come. Leave or stay with a pissed off Embiid and a pissed off Giannis. I can't wait to see how those guys come out firing next year. Lastly, we have our 2019 NBA Finals with the Golden State Warriors taking on the Toronto Raptors. I just don't think it's going to be enough. I know how great Kawhi has played, but last year, as far as the 19 years that I've been alive, I have not seen anybody put on a show greater than what LeBron did last year. Putting up 50 points in Game 1, it still wasn't enough. I know the boneheaded mistakes JR made and George Hill missing the free throw and LeBron playing the rest of the series with an injured hand, but it's LeBron. I know, like I said, how great Kawhi's been, but it's just too much. I look to also, if Toronto is going, I believe Toronto will get one in Toronto, of course. I don't think they'll get swept. But as far as making the series competitive, these are the things that has to happen. Number one, Siakam has to be the Siakam we've said, that guy's pretty great. The most improved player, Siakam. He has to be that. He can't be anything short of. Number two, we need to go back in the time machine and get Marc Gasol from Memphis and finals Danny Green. Danny Green in the finals against LeBron against the Spurs. We saw what he did, putting the ball in the basket, breaking records set by Ray Allen and stuff like that. That's the Danny Green they need, coming off screens like he used to against Golden State. I spoke to this a couple episodes back. That's the best matchup for them because Kawhi and Danny Green have played against that system before. They know how to run around it. So for the Raptors, they have a good... I think they should feel good about what they have in that area defensively against Golden State. Also, Marc Gasol, when you think back against... I wouldn't say so much against the postseason, but the early days of Golden State becoming a dynasty, you look to the Memphis of the world with Zebo and Tony Allen and Mike Conley, and the leader of that surge that Memphis presented was Marc Gasol. You look to him with the buzzer beater against San Antonio and being that defensive piece inside where you knew you couldn't bring the ball inside because Gasol was that great rim protector. All they need from him, they only need a couple games from him like that, and they'll have a shot. Now for Golden State, everything has to go wrong. Curry has to be off on the road. If Curry's going to be Curry in Roracle. I know it's Oracle, but I call it Roracle because when Curry and Clay have it going, that place is louder than anywhere in the NBA. It's almost like an NFL arena with the Seahawks or the Chiefs. Once they get rolling, there's no bringing them down. And in addition to that, we know the injuries with Boogie and KD. I just believe it's from a standpoint where for the Raptors you have better depth. You're coming off a series win where your bench was arguably your second greatest weapon, and for Golden State they're a little bit weaker on the bench right now, having to start Alfonso McKinney and Jordan Bell, so you have Quinn Cook and Sean Livingston. Iggy's a little banged up, so for them they have to be able to know that that's their spot where they can take that advantage and run with it for however long. Boogie may or may not come back with KD with the calf strain. They have to attack. They have to be with the mindset that they are in this series. If they come out and they're letting Golden State get these good screens and letting Dre run off the fast break and leaving the shooter open, it's the strategic things. Golden State is great enough to where they're going to get their looks. But for Toronto, it's going to be the standpoint of, can they get their looks as well? Are they ready for the moment? Can they find themselves relaxed enough in the finals to where you feel like they belong? And that's the biggest thing for me. Switching over to the National Football League. 3-time All Pro Gerlald McCoy is a free agent after the Buccaneers parted ways with him and brought in Ndamukong Suh, which I also believe was a very good signing for them in that Todd Bowles, Bruce Arians defense. But as far as Gerlald McCoy, I do believe there are 3 landing spots which would be very good for him. Starting with number 3, I'll go to the Dallas Cowboys. We all know that David Irving has stepped away from the game of football. He doesn't believe in the league's rules as far as smoking marijuana, and all you can say is, the best of luck to him. I do believe that them bringing in a 3-time All-Pro, 5-time Pro Bowler, and Gerlald McCoy would be a very good look for that defense. They were able to pick Tristan Hill in the 2nd round out of UCF, which I think was a good pick. They also brought in Christian Covington from the Houston Texans, in addition to the vet that they've had there for a couple seasons, Antoine Woods. I just believe for them, you've got a lot of young pieces on that defense. You still have Jalen Smith, who was flying over the field last year, along with Leighton Vander Esch, who got some good consideration for Defensive Rookie of the Year. As far as Sean Lee, we know what he brings to the table. He's probably going to get injured a couple games, so I do think that they need another veteran presence on that defense to go ahead and, be that leader on the vocal front where they can look to somebody, especially on the D-line. You have Gerlald McCoy running that 3-tech, and you look to the division, there's not too many guys, mobile quarterbacks. You have Carson Wentz, who can do a little magic, but those guys are sitting in the pocket, and I believe Gerlald McCoy can get things shaken up in there, and then you go from there. You also pair him up with DeMarcus Lawrence on the line, and I believe that you have magic. You can make magic with that. Number 2 best spot for Gerlald McCoy, I do believe, would be the Los Angeles Chargers. Brandon Mebane, shout out Seattle, is getting up there in age, 34 years old. With Gerlald McCoy, you would be adding him to 1st-round pick Jerry Tillery from Notre Dame, who was a very good player. I really like that pick for Los Angeles in the 1st round. In addition to that, you would pair him with not only that 1st-round pick selection, but Bosa and Ingram, who we both know are great players, great pass rushers. With San Diego, I felt like Los Angeles, I felt like when they played New England in the postseason this past year, they couldn't get any pressure on Brady, and we knew what the pass rushers outside were ringing, but Brady had no worries stepping up into the pocket and getting the ball off. For them, I do believe that they need that penetration from inside, and I believe Gerlald McCoy could be the source of that. Lastly, the number 1 spot that I believe Gerlald McCoy could fit in, speaking of the Patriots, the rich get richer. With the Patriots, them signing Gerlald McCoy gives them that flexibility along the line that they've had in past seasons. You look to them losing Kyle Van Noy, and they also just lost defensive end Trey Flowers to previous defensive coordinator Matt Patricia in Detroit. I believe Gerlald McCoy, them bringing in McCoy, would allow Michael Bennett to, have his Seattle type vibe where he was able to move along the defensive line. You see that a lot in today's game with the top pass rushers, Aaron Donald, Fletcher Cox, those guys at J.J. Watt. They have no problem moving around on the defensive line. And with Michael Bennett, he can play the 3-tech. He can rush outside. So Gerlald McCoy, just sticking him anywhere you want in that Bill Belichick defense. They also just brought in Danny Shelton, who they previously had, and decided to bring him back. So with that, you have guys who are familiar with the system, or guys who are so talented that they can move anywhere on the defensive line. For the Patriots, like I said, the rich get richer, bringing another player. Of course, he would have to take a pay cut, considerably less than where he would be getting from these other teams. But at this point in his career, Gerlald McCoy has to ask himself, is he more concerned with winning a ring, or is he fine with, getting a payday and competing with a starting job, being that leader on the vocal front? So I'm very interested to see what Gerald McCoy decides to do, who he decides to sign with. Moving on in the NFL, we have the Jets firing Mike McGagnon, and Adam Gase becoming the interim GM. Gase did not waste any time trading off linebacker Darren Lee to the Kansas City Chiefs, and from what I've heard, there's a chance that he may not be done. It was a report released that Coach Gase was not okay with the contract that the previous GM had given Le'Veon Bell, and this whole running back situation reminds me of the situation that they had with Jay Ajayi. Gase was the forefront of that surge, getting Ajayi out of town, and with that, you saw he was able to make Kenyon Drake his starting running back, and Drake wasn't great, but he had some memorable moments of last year. He had some flashes. You think about the game winner against the Patriots where they did the lateral and it actually worked this time. He also had a very good game against the Texans and stuff like that. So he shows the flashes. I don't know if he's, that star running back that we know that Le'Veon Bell was. But from what I've heard, there's a possibility that Le'Veon Bell could be on the move before the season begins. Regardless of what the Jets decide to do, I don't believe that the Le'Veon Bell acquisition was something that puts them in the forefront to win the division. I do think that for when Brady decides to call it one on the Hall of Fame career, the Jets could be the leaders to take the division. The Dolphins are sitting, kind of shaky with Ryan Fitzpatrick as the quarterback, not really knowing what they're doing. You also have the Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen. He showed some flashes, but as far as that team, what the Bills bring to the table, you can't really rely on to say the Bills would be that great. So for the Jets, the opportunity is there. You have the quarterback that you want. You have an all-star running back, a good wide receiver, I would say, a pretty good defense, bringing in C.J. Mosley and Leonard Williams, and I like their draft pick that they got with the defensive tackle Quinnen Williams from Alabama. So, and Jamal Adams in the secondary. You have new uniforms. So, for the Jets, I don't believe this is the year. I'm interested to see what Gase is able to do with that team. If he's going to be moving Le'Veon Bell and other pieces around, how he'll do it, what he'll be building around. But I'm interested to see what they can bring to the table for years to come and how they can set themselves up this year to compete down the line. Switching over lastly into wrestling. This segment used to just be called WWE, but in a second you'll find out why we're just going to be calling it wrestling. We'll go to Money in the Bank Fallout. The surprise of Brock Lesnar coming out of nowhere and winning the men's Money in the Bank ladder match. Very surprising, especially considering the big names that they had in that match. Strowman, McIntyre, Intercontinental Champion Finn Balor, Ricochet. So I'll get to that in a minute, why it's so surprising Brock Lesnar won, but why it's also not. In addition, you had an amazing Rollins versus Styles match that I called, that we all knew it would be amazing. It just felt like an NXT match where you felt like it could go either way. Both guys putting on a great show. It was that rare WWE main event match that wasn't the main event that felt like an NXT main event. And last year you have Bayley winning the women's Money in the Bank ladder match and cashing in on Charlotte. For WWE, this was the perfect play. We all know the reports of Charlotte. They want Charlotte to be their Ric Flair of the women's division, their John Cena getting the most title reigns. So with that, they were able to have her beat Becky and put the title on someone else. So I believe they did that in a perfect way, having Bayley cash in. And moving on to the fallout for Money in the Bank, I do believe that I'm very interested to see how they do Bayley with the SmackDown Women's Championship. She's on a whole different brand. We know how poor her previous Women's Championship run was, and it didn't feel like the WWE Universe was behind Bayley in that standpoint where they felt like they wanted her to be champion. It felt like nothing in the NXT days. So I'm interested to see if they have Bayley be that, cocky champion, because the aspect of I belong here, it didn't fit. It didn't sit well with the fans before, so I'm interested to see how WWE uses Bayley in this situation as SmackDown Women's Champion. You also have WWE presenting the 24/7 title, with this title being able to be defended at any time, anywhere. It reminds you of the Hardcore Championship. For this, the title design could have been a bit better. It's hard for me to believe that, WWE getting new titles like the Tag Team Women's Championship and the United Kingdom Championship and the Cruiserweight Championship, those titles are gorgeous. So with WWE giving us a title that looks like the 24/7 Championship, either it's just something to keep us distracted, or they'll give us a better title at a later date. But I don't know. I'm just not very invested in the title. They have it on R-Truth right now, and I'm not very interested in the guy who has it. So I'm interested to see if they'll put big names around that title, if it's just something to have on the side. Will it be defended like a respectable championship? So I'm interested to see where it goes, but I'm not so much interested right now. Lastly, I said I would be back on the subject of Brock Lesnar. Right now, WWE is at an all-time low in ratings. They're going to do whatever it takes to get to get guys to come back and view. And with that, Brock, he's been a part-time champion. There's been times where fans felt like he was holding the company hostage. But one thing that's for sure is when he's on your screen on watching WWE programming, the ratings are up. And he's just that big box office draw for them. And I believe, we'll see that it works. And Brock is now Mr. Money in the Bank. He can cash in on Seth Rollins or Kofi Kingston. I believe that he will eventually cash in on Kofi Kingston. Just seeing how WWE is now moving SmackDown to Fox, and they need that big name in addition to Roman Reigns on SmackDown. So I do think it'll be Brock. He'll win the title, and that'll be your guy moving on to Fox. Also, I believe WWE now has legit competition. We've heard about the TNAs and the New Japan Pro Wrestling, which this is a sort of mixture of both, but AEW. This is something that we've heard for months on months, that this could be the next big thing in pro wrestling. You look to the Cody Rhodes, the whole Bullet Club, the Young Bucks, arguably the best tag team in the world. You have Kenny Omega, who's arguably the best wrestler in the world, and Chris Jericho, one of my favorite WWE wrestlers of all time, being over there with them. There's just so much that they have to offer, and now you have WWE fans, even WWE superstars, tweeting about the show, and it's very legit that they are a threat to WWE's success. In addition to not only, them having the TNT deal, but they also are moving on we know that these wrestling companies take up venues, and they often do it in the same city. Now, WWE hasn't had any comp with TNA, the lower and lower they get, switching TV networks and stuff like that. But AEW, this is all guys who left WWE at one point or another, and they've created this success on their own together. So it's very intriguing on how they could rise up as a unit against the juggernaut that WWE and Vince McMahon have been over the years. You have Cody Rhodes with the Triple H diss. He took the sledgehammer and bashed it in on the throne that we all know Triple H has his, electrifying WrestleMania interests on. Yeah, Bret Hart, who debuted a beautiful title. I mean, their title is, along the lines of best WWE titles. You look to World Heavyweight Championship, big gold belt, IC Championship. It's just beautiful. And I really like how it's put together. It looks like a real wrestling title. Jericho versus Omega. Like I said, Jericho being one of the best WWE wrestlers of all time, in my opinion. You also have him being one of the best trash talkers. CM Punk used to be my favorite wrestler. Their feud was one of my favorites. You have Omega being arguably the best wrestler in the world, the leader of the Bullet Club. We know how much charisma he has. So just to see those guys square off the way they did, Jericho come out on top was very interesting because they put him on the forefront of AEW, being one of the most known names in pro wrestling of all time. And the shock of the night, Dean Ambrose, aka and now going by his previous indie name Jon Moxley, blindsiding WWE. The report was WWE was expecting him to pursue acting possibilities or prefer on the indie scene at a lower level, but Dean, now known as John, went all in on himself, signed a multi-million-dollar deal with AEW, and now it looks like he's going to be in that, main event top level with Jericho and those guys. And I believe, I'm very proud for Dean. I'm very happy for him. Former Shield member, one of the most iconic stables in WWE history. You now put him in the indie scene with the top guys who have left WWE and put themselves on the forefront of the pro wrestling scene. I'm interested to see how Dean can invest in himself and put himself on that top level for when he comes back to WWE. They're not thinking of him as a slouch, as the last member of the Shield. You're thinking about him as the member of the Shield. So I'm interested to see how he can push himself in AEW. But for today's show, that is all. We want to make sure that here at Dishhtribute, we're maintaining the Dishhtribute goal and putting out the best product every episode. Starting next month, we will be starting guest appearances. I'll have my boy Austin on the show. We'll also be making sure to do call-ins, so we'll be putting that out. Make sure that you're getting involved with us on Twitter, Instagram, all types of social media. You can follow Dishhtribute on all social media at Dishhtribute. You can also follow my personal page at Damon Geis on Twitter and Instagram. And follow everything PACT Brand at PACT Brand. And follow the PACT Life Pod. Also be sure to check out the latest episode of the PACT Life Pod where Bruiser, Cut, and Lil B discuss their finals predictions, top 5 Wiz projects, and much more. I'm your host, Damon Geis, signing off.